Okay, good morning. My name is Jennifer Saponis, and I am with the Capital District Transportation Committee, and I'm welcoming everyone to the October Active Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. So I will go through the Zoom participants list and call, call out all the attendees that I see here. If I miss you, once we're all through, please let me know. I'm just gonna call them out in the order that they appear on my screen. So we have Greg Francis from the city of Hoboken, Rogerio Rodriguez from the Clifton Park Mobility, the Shen Mobility Group, Meg Fennell from New York State DOT, Jack Mance from AGFTC. It says Sandy Misfits, but I think that's Carrie Ward from CDTC, Alexandra Barr from Saratoga County Department of Health, Valerie Dean from New York State DOT, John Mitchell from Half Moon and the Champlain Canal Trails Committee, Charles Welge from Albany County Department of Health, Dave Wooden from Waterford Planning, Ed Brennan from Albany Bicycling Coalition, and Jennifer Hogan from the New York State Department of Health. And then we'll go around the table here at CDTC and let everyone introduce themselves, and we'll start with Ivan.
Ivan Ramos, NYBC.
Martin Daly, Capital District Regional Planning Commission.
Rima Shania, CDTC. Rebecca Odell, CDTC.
Linda Vonderheide, Rensselaer County.
Great. Did I miss anyone? Okay. So we're gonna start our meeting with a presentation from Greg Francis. You may remember Greg. He is a former Capital Region resident and Parks and Trails New York employee, now at the city of Hoboken. And he's going to talk to us about City of Hoboken's Vision Zero policy and implementation. You may have read about City of Hoboken's efforts in the last year, or have seen kind of highlights from their success in different news media. So, but I'll pass it over to Greg. Greg, if you want to share your screen.
So good morning, everyone. It's good to be back with you all. I actually, Jen, I also interned for Jack at AGFTC a while back. So I go back way deep. Let me just make this full screen. All right, so thank you, Jen, for having me, and I hope this presentation is helpful. Actually, when I was working for PTNY, I helped with the Troy Bicycle Connections plan, and through that we actually looked at Hoboken for some of our inspiration for that plan. So what I'm about to show you is definitely applicable to the Capital District. So real quick, Hoboken is a very small city. It's just 1.2 square miles. It's directly across the Hudson River from Manhattan. It looks very similar to a lot of cities in the capital region. It has about 60,000 residents, so it's very dense. And pre-COVID, it had the highest transit ridership in the United States. We have a current mayor who's very supportive of pedestrian safety, and a previous mayor that was supportive of pedestrian safety. And I'll talk briefly just how that has kind of set us up for success where we are currently. And we've had 0 traffic-related deaths since 2018, and a 42% decline in traffic-related injuries since then as well. Our Vision Zero action plan was a multi-step process. It started in 2019 when Mayor Bala, our current mayor, signed an executive order creating our task force and outlining the steps for the creation of the Vision Zero action plan, including community engagement. And in 2021, Mayor Bala signed an extension of the task force and, added new members to our task force that would help with the implementation process. So like most planning processes, we looked at, we had a task force, which was our advisory committee. We had a very aggressive public outreach process, even though it was right in the middle of the peak of COVID-19. It was mostly online, and we had some in-person quick builds. And we did our most comprehensive crash analysis, a 5-year crash analysis. And that was to help us understand what behaviors were causing our most serious crashes, and especially the ones that were causing injuries and deaths. And all of that led to the creation of an action plan with more than 110 action items. And we look at our action plan as something that will update every 2 to 3 years. And just quickly, our Vision Zero goal is to eliminate all traffic-related deaths and injuries by 2030. So we're going for a more aggressive goal than what you typically see, but our numbers are low enough, and we think because of our reputation as a walkable city, we really need to go further and eliminate all injuries. Our task force is pretty extensive. It includes everyone from our police department, our fire department, our board of education, our housing authority, the director of the department that buys our sanitation trucks. So Vision Zero requires a holistic view of traffic safety. We use a safe systems approach, which is looking at not everything from how streets are designed to how vehicles are designed, how employees are trained who are driving those vehicles, how victims are treated, and how we look at data after a crash happens, to make sure that we don't repeat and what we can learn from those crashes and hopefully not repeat them. And we also have someone from Jersey City on our task force because Jersey City is our neighbor directly to the south and west. And they had an action plan or a Vision Zero process more than a year before we did. And most of our high injury network is borders Jersey City. So we need that intermunicipal cooperation. And we've invited them on our task force, and I serve on their task force. One of our biggest things that we've done since implementing Vision Zero in Hoboken is reducing our speed limit to 20 miles per hour citywide. We had previously had a 25 mile per hour speed limit. We know that reducing it even 5 miles slower than that has a big impact on crash severity. And it also, in Hoboken, where all of our streets are very narrow, sight lines are very limited, we are able to create a safer environment where we reduce stopping distances by almost 20 feet, or by more than 20 feet at 20 miles an hour compared to 25 miles an hour. And from the infrastructure side, over the past 13 years, well before I got to Hoboken, we look at every street repaving opportunity as an opportunity to incorporate complete streets infrastructure. So when we're repaving all of our streets, we make sure that we're not just replacing what was there before, but looking at the crash data, taking in community feedback, and making sure that we're putting in bike lanes if there weren't bike lanes there, making sure the crosswalks are more visible, and then also implementing various things such as curb extensions, whether they're painted, they include rain gardens, or other pedestrian safety infrastructure. And part of this is informed by a document that we created 3 years ago, the Hoboken Complete Street Design Guide, which identifies streets, ranks all the streets, and identifies minimum safety improvements for each of those streets. And really, as I mentioned, what we've been doing is over the past 13 years, we've been making these short-term improvements to make sure that over time, we're not just leaving streets as they are, but including more aggressive and more effective pedestrian safety improvements when we have an opportunity to address a certain street or intersection through our paving program, or if we have a separate grant specifically focused on that area. So you can see here we have the same intersection over time. It's only within the last 10 years this is showing. But there's, on the left, it's kind of the previous condition where there was really no pedestrian safety infrastructure other than crosswalks. We had some bike lanes and we had some head and angle parking. And over time, we put in a temporary curb extension, a painted curb extension here, which, not only this is across from a school and a playground. So we're reducing crossing distances here. We're slowing turning movements, and then increasing safety by having back and angle parking here. And this is what it looks like now. It has a concrete curb extension, a lot more visible crosswalks, and some additional pavement markings, which I'll go through to prevent people from parking close to the crosswalk. This is kind of our what we've been championing over the last 13 years, and this is very easy for us to do, and it's very popular. And so in the state of New Jersey, it's illegal to park within 25 feet of a crosswalk, and a lot of communities enforce it differently. We in Hoboken, we do our best to enforce it with at a minimum this striping and these flexible delineators, because in Hoboken, like many cities, every space is very valuable, and people will park as close as they can to the crosswalk, sometimes on the crosswalk, because there's very few places to park on the street. So we have to put physical items there, and we have a mix of we have bike corrals in some locations, and we have these flexible bollards. We also have these painted curb extensions with flexible bollards as well. And so what this does is this opens up the visibility for vehicles that are approaching the intersection, so they can see cars that are coming down the street, or they can see pedestrians that are crossing. And it also gives pedestrians some extra space to wait as they're waiting to cross the street. For instance, if a mom is pushing a stroller, she can get all the way up to this point right here. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor before kind of being in the travel lane and see if she can cross. And all over Hoboken, you'll see this type of daylighting in various forms. Here we have it right across from a park. We have a T intersection here. We have this painted curb extension. And over time, as you can see in these photos, they do need to be replaced, but they're a very low cost material, and they're pretty effective. They can get run over by trucks and bounce right back. Our fire department likes them because they can still negotiate these pretty narrow streets. And the public likes them because it feels much safer walking through Hoboken. We also are a very flood prone city. About 85% of our city is in the floodplain. And we have to incorporate green infrastructure in our public right of way whenever we can. And so we have these rain garden curb extensions throughout Hoboken. And they add a really nice aesthetic element to the street, and they also improve safety, like I said, by providing greater visibility and reducing crossing distances for pedestrians. And restaurants like having a lot of this daylighting as well. This restaurant right here on the right has a parklet, like an outdoor dining venue, and they have this bike corrals right here that they've sponsored for their business and for residents as well. And they also have some additional planners here. So our local businesses also get involved with traffic safety. And then in some locations, we even use our city bike, which is our bike share program, docks, to provide daylighting. And that's told to keep it pretty brief. So I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about any of these things further. But thanks, like I said, thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Greg. So we can open it up to questions if you want to unmute yourself, if you're on Zoom, or we may have questions here in the room. Also, please feel free to use the chat. I will monitor that, and if you want to put your question in the chat, I'll read it out loud. So yes, thank you, Greg. That was a really great presentation. Does anyone want to kick off the questions?
I get a question.
Martin.
In regards to the speed limit reduction, certainly it takes the negotiation with the enforcement agency or police to accept doing speed reductions. Has there been a campaign to educate drivers or go out and do the citations? And do you have any data as far as whether the speed reduction is working from the point of people are slowing down or people are starting to get more citations for speeding.
So part of the speed study, part of the speed limit reduction what included a speed study. So I think at 16 locations across the city, we put up these radar detectors that can collect speed data over a 2-day period. And what we learned from that was that in most locations, because of the narrowness of the streets, the existing kind of traffic safety, mentality of many drivers, most streets already people were driving below 20 miles an hour. But we did involve our police department from the outset. They're our co-chair of our Vision Zero task force. So we made sure that, throughout the entire process, they were involved and they understood what the implications were when we were going to implement this. And this was just passed by our city council in August. So we just started putting up the signage and working with the Hoboken Police Department and the Hudson County Sheriff's Office, because we also have some county roads. They haven't really started too much enforcement yet. We have some educational materials that we pushed out and we've done some press releases. But these signs that we've installed that have the speed feedback signs are another way that we're trying to reach out to drivers and let them know that in Hoboken, the speed limit is 20 miles an hour. And then, the last part of your question, we haven't collected any after data yet to see if those speeds are still within the below 20 mile per hour range.
Thanks.
I think Ivan has a question and then we'll go to the Zoom question.
Thank you. Impressive effort, impressive presentation. Could you tell us a little bit more about coordinating with Jersey City, since things are so tight in that area, as I happen to know?
Yeah, Jersey City is much bigger than Hoboken. Hoboken has 60,000 people. Jersey City has about 300,000 people. And geographically, it's much bigger as well. But it's our border city on two sides. And then the only other land border is to the north with a smaller municipality. So a lot of our roads that lead into Hoboken, and Hoboken's between the Lincoln and Holland tunnels. So we get a lot of tunnel traffic, is coming into Jersey City, and then into Hoboken, we have some cut through traffic as well. So those streets also tend to be our most crash prone streets. And so, we need to work with Jersey City on street redesigns. And an example of that is there's a gap we have a cycle track on one street that ends right at the Hoboken Jersey City border, and Jersey City has one on their side as well that ends. So for this one block, there's a gap in this bikeway network. And so we're working with Jersey City to close that gap. And Jersey City has, since 90% of the project is in Jersey City. We worked on the design for the Hoboken part, met with the Jersey City team, and Jersey City is going to actually go out and stripe and install the barrier. So that's just one example. And then we are working with Jersey City with City Bike. We have a coordinated program with them. And we know that a lot of people about 13% of our total ridership happens between Jersey City and Hoboken. So those are just two examples of how integrated, from a Vision Zero perspective, our two cities are.
That's great. All right. We have a bunch of questions on Zoom, and most of them are from our municipal planners. So let's get to them. So Tina in Saratoga asks, what have the barriers been to moving forward with complete streets treatments, especially with city staff and budgeting for improvements and maintenance of improvements?
Yeah, I think one of our biggest barriers is we have a pretty small staff. We're a pretty small city, and we have a lot going on. And we're working on major flood resiliency projects. We're working on Vision Zero. And we have other priorities as well. So just making sure that, for instance, with flood resiliency projects, we're including Vision Zero safety elements in those projects, or when we're doing a street redesign, including some flood resiliency as well. And then also, I think, as people see more and more of these new initiatives rolled out, or they understand that daylighting is helps with safety and is part of Vision Zero. I think there's just a greater awareness of Vision Zero and its importance in making sure that, you know, our streets are safe for everyone in Hoboken. Another challenge is, you know, we have six wards, electoral wards, with 6 city council members who represent those wards. And then we have 3 at-large members. So we have a large council for such a small city. So when you make a change to a block, for instance, chances are the person on that block knows the council members. So we have to make sure that, you know, we're doing our due diligence and reaching out to council members and getting their buy-in as well. When we're doing things like taking away parking or taking away illegal parking, because in New Jersey, it's illegal to park within 25 feet of a crosswalk. But people will park anywhere if there's not something preventing them from doing it.
Thanks, Greg. Jen from Clifton Park asked, what has been your annual investment to support implementing these small scale investments, retrofitting intersections, and who was your champion?
I don't know the specific cost. I know we get about, we spend about $1.3 million per year on street repaving, which is I think would seem like a pretty small number. It usually covers, you know, 10 to 12 blocks of repaving per year. So it's a slow process, and it's something that when we have our DOT funding for roadway repaving, making sure that we're including things like curb extensions into those projects, using state money. A lot of communities in New Jersey, when they do roadway repaving, they just replace what was there before. And we've learned over time that we can be a little bit more aggressive, and the state is supportive of that. And our champion, you know, our previous mayor, Dawn Zimmer, was a major champion. Her father-in-law was actually struck and killed by a car. And it's just something that over time, as Hoboken has a reputation for being a walkable city, we have a pretty high walk score citywide. It's something that we need to, you know, make sure that we're living up to that reputation, and people in the community understand that and are supportive of it. So there's no real champion. I guess the mayor is an important champion, the current mayor as well, but I think it's a community driven effort as well.
Dave from Waterford asked if you needed to get special legislation from New Jersey to reduce the speed limit to 20. Also, noticed an in-road pedestrian crossing sign with stop for pedestrians, and in New York, it's yield to pedestrians. Is New Jersey a stop for pedestrian state?
We didn't need to get any state approval. I think New Jersey gives states or municipalities the ability. I'm pretty sure. I'm not the. I guess I know they do, because we were able to get it done. But we don't need state approval to lower our speed limits. And yes, New Jersey is a stop for pedestrian.
And just a few more questions. Can you, Nate from Bethlehem asked if you could talk a little bit about snow plowing and the physical improvements, and how the discussions go with highway departments, any lessons learned from post installation?
Yeah, these flexible delineators that I showed, and they don't all survive snow. We get probably a few plowable snowstorms every year, and we're learning over time which materials are more durable and can survive plowing. But typically what happens is we designate several dozen, I would say about like 30 intersections per year for priorities for daylighting. And we make sure that we order enough of these flexible delineators that they're fully daylit, and also, you know, from a maintenance perspective, making sure that when snow plowing does happen, that those intersections have those after the end of the snowstorm. You know, you can see in this photo, there's 2 separate types of delineators. So the ones on the left are the older style. When they get hit by a snowplow, they don't last. These ones are much more durable, and you know, just making sure that our environmental services director, who manages snow plowing in Hudson County, also does some snow plowing on county roads, understand that these these curb extensions are out there, and also having them on our task force helps them understand the value of these things, so they're not seen as just an impediment for snow plowing. But we haven't had any major issues with snow removal from any of these different types of improvements.
Ed, who represents the Albany Bicycle Coalition, asks, other than limited access roads, were there any roads that you were not able to change the speed limit to 20 miles per hour?
So we actually changed the speed limit on all of our roads to 20 miles an hour. So we worked with Hudson County throughout the process as well to make sure that we were able to include their roads on our citywide speed limit reduction.
And then Ed followed up with, he believes New Jersey changed to stop and stay stopped and crosswalks fairly recently. Do you know if there's any reports or studies of whether this has improved the odds for pedestrians?
I don't know, no.
And then when we have two more questions and then we'll let Greg go. Art from Cycle Schenectady asked, did you reduce the number of traffic lanes and replace bike lanes in any cases? Also, did you eliminate any legal parking spaces?
Yes, to both. Observer Highway, if you want to look at that, it's on our website, hobokenNJ.gov, and also vzhoboken.com is our Vision Zero website. That was a traditional road diet. We had a 4-lane road, and that was reduced to 2 lanes in each direction, with a turn lane. And we actually had an access road that was mostly used for parking that we repurposed as a 2-way cycle track and a pedestrian walking path. And that was over 5 years ago. And then we also have another street, Willow Avenue, that we're looking at. It's a 4-lane street now, looking at ways we can include some bicycle and traffic calming, potentially through a road diet.
Great. And Tina in Saratoga asked, how aggressively do the police enforce the speed limit?
They have one officer that's certified to do radar, that can use a radar gun. So there's not a lot of aggressive speed enforcement. It's very difficult to drive fast on most Hoboken streets. As you can see in these photos, the streets are very narrow, especially the east-west streets. There's lots of stopping for pedestrians in the crosswalk. So it's when we did our speed data collection, it really held up that drivers are driving much slower than 20 miles an hour on most roads.
Great, thank you, Greg. There were some follow-up just comments and stuff in the chat if anyone wants to check that out. Greg, thank you so much. It was good to hear from you and so glad to see things going well in Hoboken. It would be great if you were closer and we could all go down and get a walking tour, but this was a good alternative, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And that's my email on the bottom, and you can always reach out if you have my Gmail as well. And that's our website, vzhoboken.com. So thanks again. It's good to talk
Would
to
you be
everyone.
able to send me your slides so we can include them in our notes? Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. All right. So our next agenda item, speaking of coordination with neighboring areas, we have Jack Nance from the Adirondack Glens Falls Transportation Council here, and he's gonna tell us what's going on up in that MPO area that is just north of CDTC. So Jack, you can share your screen.
Great, thank you very much. And let's see here. There, that should do it. And thank you for giving me a few minutes this morning. And also, Greg, thank you for a great presentation and for making me feel very old to see our old intern doing all this great work. It's great to see. So just a few updates from us up in Glens Falls, the MPO here. I really just have this one slide, so you don't have to watch my face talking the whole time. But a few things that we've been working on through spring, summer, fall of 2022 related to bike ped. The first is the Salem Pedestrian Connection Study. Salem is in the eastern part of Washington County, if you're not familiar with it. And this was a study we did in the former village. They were dissolved a few years ago, and now it's just the town. They've done a lot of kind of loose concept planning over the years. They've gotten Greenway grants and such. So we basically took all of the plans that they have previously done, tried to kind of coalesce them together, refine them, and bring them into a state so that they could go after, grants, basically. And we were very lucky that we had a really great steering committee on this. This will also connect to the proposed Slate Valley Rail Trail, which travels kind of through Washington County and Vermont. It kind of snakes around the border between Salem and Granville, if you're familiar with that area. So we're hoping that we'll get some good implementation on this plan. It was completed in September, and the town supervisor was already out holding meetings, trying to get some trail planning going, waving the plan around. It was still a draft. So I have very good feeling that we're going to get some good implementation on this, because she's really gung-ho and ready to spring into action. So stay tuned for more on that, and especially on that Slate Valley Rail Trail. I think we're going to have some really good implementation on that in the next couple years. And then the next three are kind of smaller projects. We have an engineering assistance program through our MPO that allows us to use our on-call engineers to assist our local municipalities for smaller projects. So the first is just starting now. This is the Maple Street Bicycle Facility Improvement Project. This is in the city of Glens Falls. This is kind of a precursor to a repaving effort. So the city, we've been telling for years, as Greg said, it's good to just kind of wrap in complete streets projects before you go out and just start repaving. And so the city finally was like, hey, we'll take you up on that. So we're helping them to kind of assess Maple Street, which is just a neighborhood street in Glens Falls that's up for repaving next year, to see whether or not it can be improved through striping or other low-cost measures in terms of creating a more bicycle-friendly environment. So that's just getting started. Another project we're working on right now is the Mill Pond pedestrian improvements. This is actually up in a hamlet in the town of Hoboken, in the very far north of Warren County in Brant Lake. It's a beautiful little area, and it's right on Brant Lake, obviously. So the hamlet is interested in improving some pedestrian crossings. They do a lot of like food festivals and things up there. And also in establishing a trail all the way around Mill Pond, which also includes portions of State Route 8. So we're almost through getting a draft report on this, so it should be out for public comment in the next few weeks. So that should be great. And then finally, this year, we've done quite a few intersection improvements. And again, these are just concepts for the city of Glens Falls, all focused on pedestrian improvements and all along Glen Street, which is one of our major connectors in town. So that's kind of what we've been working on in terms of bike ped. There's also a lot of other things going on that we're kind of tangentially working on as well. One was that, as you may know, CDTA actually expanded their bike share program up into Warren County last year. It was a great success. We were very, very happy with it, and they actually ended up expanding it this summer, which we were thrilled with. So we've got a good number of bikes in Glens Falls and also all the way up in Lake George, and they're connected by the Warren County Bikeway. So it's really a win-win for everybody. Another thing is the town of Queensbury recently passed an e-bike law. This was over the summer. They passed the law stating basically that e-bikes, class 1 and class 2 e-bikes, are allowed anywhere in the town that a regular bicycle is allowed. And I can, talk more about that. I know sometimes people had some questions about that. Another thing that was just recently, this happened in, I think, late August or early September, I can't quite remember, was we have a local bicycle advocacy group called Bike Glens Falls. And they were actually able to do a complete street takeover project during one of our kind of little food festivals that we do in the summer. So they actually went out with help from the Glens Falls Hospital Department of Health program. And they got some consultant help through, I think, Labella. And they went out and did some temporary striping. They put in a variety of bike lanes in different configurations in like a 2-block area in downtown Glens Falls. But not only that, they had people stationed all around. The bike share bikes were there that were available. They did surveys for people who, who tooled around a little bit and then said, which configuration do you like the best? So they got some great survey feedback from that. I don't believe there's a final kind of report out of that effort yet, but they are working on a kind of comprehensive bike plan for the city of Glens Falls. So that was a really great little project. And then finally, Warren County actually received, I think, $160,000 in Northern Borders grant money to do a trail improvement plan that's focused on improving the connections between the Warren County Bikeway, the Feeder Canalway Trail, and then the Champlain Canalway Trail as well. This was actually something that we had on our UPWP for this year, but we certainly didn't have $160,000 to throw at it. So we're really happy to see that they got this grant money, because not only does it free us up to use our resources elsewhere, they're just going to get a much, much better product out of this. And they were also very, very forward thinking and kind of pre-authorized $100,000 of their own ARPA funds for implementation for whatever comes out of the plan. So they are just ready to go. As soon as the ink is dry on this plan, they will be able to do some kind of implementation. I believe wayfinding is going to be a really big part of that. We helped out last year by doing a signage inventory for the entirety of the Warren County Bikeway and Feeder Canalway Trail. So they'll be able to use that data. They're also looking at improving some of the on-road connections, especially within the city of Glens Falls and the town of Queensbury. So that should be a great project. I believe they are getting started on that in the fall, probably doing RFPs for consultants, in the winter, and really rolling into it, I think, next year. So that's pretty much all I had for updates for recently. Is there any questions?
Does anyone have any questions here in the conference room? Or if you're online and have a question, you can unmute or use the chat. Ed has a question. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Thank you very much. You mentioned encouraging the use of like repaving projects to take a look at things, and I think it was Glens Falls you were talking about. Do you see any limitations, or are there any problems with funding under the current Complete Streets law? I guess, as I understand it, state funding is or not available for repaving, resurfacing, and those type of projects, like the maintenance type projects. Is there a way you get around that?
Well, in this case, it's a local city street, so there's no issue in terms of that, because it's not a state roadway. But so we haven't really faced any issues yet with trying to do this on a state highway or a state touring route. So I'm not sure if that would come up, but that's certainly something we're keeping in mind.
Yeah, thanks.
Tina?
Hi, this is Tina from Saratoga. I have two questions. One was just following up on the repaving and repaving laws. How are you getting around using the CHIPS funding when you're doing repaving for bike lanes, which I didn't think were able to be covered? Any striping? And also in your e-bike law, does it include scooters? And were you, how have you been dealing with micromobility? Thanks.
In terms of CHIPS, I'm not sure yet, just because we are only still we're still doing traffic counts. We don't have it. There is no concept yet to be able to know what the final outcome will be in terms of whether bike lanes are even feasible. But I would imagine that if there was a problem with having those kind of limitations, that the city would go after a separate funding source. There's a couple of new funding sources coming out, carbon reduction or TAP, or we have our own Make the Connections program, which can be used for small scale bike ped projects. So I would imagine they would go after one of those to kind of fill the gap. And in terms of the e-bike law, it does not cover scooters. It's only for class 1 and class 2 e-bikes. As far as I know, I don't know of any municipalities in our area that are allowing scooters at this point. So that's where we're at with that.
We have a question in the chat. Jen from Clifton Park asked, have you employed speed limits and implemented additional lines on trails and or signage for e-bikes?
No, it's a little bit complicated because the main trail in Warren County is owned by the county, not by the town of Queensberry. So, and the Warren County Board of Supervisors has been mulling over e-bikes for months now. I think at this point it might still be tabled. I'm not even sure where it's at anymore. They've been talking about it for so long. So basically Queensberry kind of got sick of waiting around and said, well, while you're trying to figure this out for the bikeway, we're going to at least address the streets in Queensberry, because it is a suburban town and there are a lot of roads, local roads that are 30, 35, 40, 45 miles an hour that bikes are on all the time. And so what they were saying was, while the county's trying to figure out what they want to do about the trail, let's at least allow cyclists to be able to get their bikes out of their driveway so that they can ride to the trail at whatever point they can do it. So that's kind of where we're at. We're still waiting for the county, and they're still a little bit behind the ball, but they'll get there eventually, I'm sure. So that's where, it's kind of this weird situation. So I think Queensberry was just trying to get ahead of the situation.
Thanks, Jack. Any last questions for Jack before we move on? Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. Good to see you. Okay, so I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. Okay, I think can everyone see my screen in a normal presentation?
Yes.
Full slide?
I can see it. It's working.
Thank you. We can move past those. Okay. So for Cdtc updates, I wanted to let everyone know that Cdtc has the Planning Committee approved the release of the 2023-24 Unified Planning Work Program solicitation. So we have a web page for that where all of the program guidelines, application, and all the information you may need is. We are making about $1 million in planning funds available to cities, towns, villages, counties, and member organizations in the Cdtc area. There will be a virtual workshop for prospective applicants Thursday, October 20th at 1 p.m. And the link to register for that workshop is on the UPWP webpage. All proposals must be complete and received by Wednesday, November 30th. So this might be a little bit difficult to see, but this is in the UPWP solicitation guidance document on the webpage. But we are doing things a little bit differently this year in that we have broken up project or program eligibility into 3 different categories. So small scale projects that may cost up to $25,000 and can be done here by CDTC staff. We're calling it like technical assistance program. There's a 10% match requirement for that, and that's all in kind. So that's staff or volunteer labor. And then there are medium scale projects, and this would be like your linkage type of project up to $150,000. We've increased that maximum funding request amount because, you know, we hadn't changed it for the linkage program in quite a while, and costs have gone up. So we increased that, and this also requires a 10% match, which can be cash or in kind. So the match requirement is less than it has been in the past. And that is for the corridor studies, maybe zoning updates, bike and pet master plans, really the types of plans that you may have seen through what we call our linkage program in the past. And there are more ideas for things that you can do on the UPWP webpage. And then lastly, large scale regional planning projects. So these are things that are multi-jurisdictional, or there are projects that would implement big ideas or projects that are discussed in New Visions or other regional plans. The maximum funding request is $250,000. And the match requirement is a cash match contribution of no less than 15% or an in-kind match contribution of not less than 10% of the actual project cost. So there's some examples of types of plans, feasibility studies for larger trail systems, freight planning studies, transit planning studies, and there's more examples on the webpage. So again, the program materials are all on the UPWP webpage. We highly encourage you to participate in the virtual workshop next week. And if you are thinking about applying and you have a project idea and you have questions, CDTC will schedule a pre-application meeting to discuss them with you. Okay. Just reminding everyone that the Capital Coexist program is still open. I know the weather is changing, and it's probably going to be harder to get your bike event or anything in before the snow hits the ground. But if you have something and are interested, we are still accepting project proposals. And of course, the CDTC, CDRPC technical assistance program is also currently open. This is something that you can propose a project idea at any time. You don't necessarily have to wait for the UPWP solicitation. If you are looking for information on discretionary or formula programs that have been announced as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, CDTC does have a webpage where we are tracking everything. So if you go to cdtcmpo.org/bill, BIL, as new programs are announced, we post them. And then if there is something that CDTC can do to help you, whether it's a map tool or a checklist or a fact sheet, we've been trying to develop those for each program as we can. The ongoing implementation of New Visions 2050, our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. We have a virtual learning series webinar next week. It is Pedestrian Safety Month, so we're calling it Walktober Pedestrian Safety Planning Tool. So we'll have some presentations on local safety initiatives and pedestrian lighting. We have someone from Federal Highways who will be talking about the somewhat recently released pedestrian lighting primer. So talking about how we can use these tools and technologies to improve pedestrian safety. And we are working on developing a scope for the next Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. So status of planning initiatives, these are all Cdtc supported planning studies that are ongoing. Some projects to note, and these were on the attached to the agenda, and they'll be on with the meeting notes. The Federal Street Corridor Study, currently they are drafting the report, and we hope to have a presentation from the project team sometime in the next 2 months with those draft recommendations. 3 linkage studies are getting started. We identified a consultant and are in the process of scheduling a kickoff meeting for the city of Schenectady, Albany, and Crane Streets linkage study. There is an REI out for the Sand Creek Road Complete Streets feasibility study. And they are in the process of selecting a consultant for the town of Brunswick Hoosick Road Corridor Study. There is also a technical assistance program project, the Riverside Avenue Access Improvements, which is in the city of Rensselaer, and looking at freight impacts to local streets there. And then last week, we also just got approval from Planning Committee to move forward with a new technical assistance project in Saratoga Springs called Reconnecting the West Side. So that is a bike and ped focused type of project that will be beginning very soon. The ADA self-evaluation and transition plan plans are all moving forward, and some of them have drafts available. And we hope to have more updates on that program soon. And then the bus lane feasibility study, the draft report was out for public review, and that's being finalized. We're also working with Albany County to look at the feasibility of the loop trail, which was proposed in the Capital District Trails Plan. So that's been moving along. And then, as you can see, a number of other regional studies, like the regional truck parking study, the Smart Communities Guidebook, an asset management plan for the town of Hoosick. And then additional planning studies that we are assisting with are 2 NISDOT-led projects, or I should say 1 NISDOT-led project for the reimagining 787 corridor. And then we added our motor vehicle bicycle and pedestrian count services contract to this. So the RFP is out, and we are in the process of selecting a consultant for that. So we'll have that information in our meeting notes and link to websites or web pages that we need to. Are there any other project or planning updates that anyone wants to announce or talk about today? Martin?
Yeah, October 28th is our annual planning and zoning workshop. This will be the first year in 3 years that we're back to doing this in person, which is really great. We'll be at Hudson Valley Community College. There'll be a number of sessions related to emerging topics in law, planning ethics, stormwater and green infrastructure. We'll have sessions about climate resiliency and adaptation. There'll be a session from Cdtc as well about transportation planning. But the event runs roughly from 9 to 3:30 at HVCC. You can register through CDRPC's website. The registration cost is $40. This is a great opportunity if you have planning and zoning board members to get them their 4 hours of required training per year. We'll also have AICP credits available for planners who need to get those CMs as well. The cost of the program is $40. It does include a lunch and 2 coffee breaks and snacks. So it's a pretty good value for a day long of training. And our opening session will be talking about marijuana zoning in New York State. So it's a real emerging issue that a lot of communities are struggling with. So that'll be our plenary, and that is also put together with New York Conference of Mayors, who are providing some guidance to the New York State Cannabis Control Board. So that'd be an interesting topic that we've never had before. Really on the cutting edge of emerging zoning issues in relation to cannabis control. So please check out that information. Again, it's on October 28th at Hudson Valley Community College, $40. And if you have any questions about the program or the registration process, reach out to me. We can work that out.
Thanks, Martin. Ivan, did you want to talk about the bananas?
Just to mention, the Menands connection from Ward's Lane interchange to 787 had been opened. It was a nice event in early September. The connection also dips down under the south lane or southbound lane of the interchange. So you get down to a lower level, which opens up an entire area directly to the west of 787, which is a beautiful set of wetlands, publicly owned. So I'm hoping that we can get a connection to that. And it's open. We can get across 787.
There's a neat little trail. I went on it. It looks fantastic. And it seems like they took that into consideration when they built it, because there's a stub, like you'd have a stub at the end of a roundabout that leads to a future development. There's a stub that feels like they know that there's something beyond that trail to connect.
Kudos to DOT, though. Myself and Ron Miller, who the connection is named after, planned a much more simple and cheaper solution. DOT designers chose a slightly more expensive, but much more flexible and better designed, safer design. So things can get done actually with the MPO CDTC support, of course. Very important.
Some gateway at the end of that ramp would be useful, kind of make it more attractive for people to get from Menands onto it. But the ramp's there, so hopefully people start using it.
I would imagine sooner or later, the people in Loudonville are gonna wanna get down off the hill and into that.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to get into the trail.
Yeah, but I haven't been in that area. I used to drive there all the time to go to Monkey Ward's when it was a store. And I was like, I haven't been in
Getting
that area for a
yourself
while. I'm really getting myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a nice piece in the spotlight and the Time Junior on it, so I'll try and find those pieces and link to them in our meeting notes. Are there any updates from folks that are on the Zoom? Don't be shy, you can unmute and or you can put it in the chat, but if not, that's okay too. You can always send them to me and I can include them in our notes. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, November 8th. We'll continue to offer a virtual participation way. It looks like we still have a lot of committee members who prefer to join us on the Zoom, and that's great. But if you do want to come and see us in person because you miss CDTC and you want to taste again upgraded coffee, we'll be here. So I hope everyone has a great rest of their October, safe October, and we will see you in November. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.